I don't know how on even the local level we can these last several days, because going into the programming files from last week, of course, we talked quite a bit about the Republican National Convention. It has a great impact on us locally, of course, as do all of these things that trickle down, or what was it Archie Bunker once referred to it as tinkle down? Probably from Washington, that's a better explanation on all of that. So we've got the Democrats now doing their dog and pony show in Philadelphia, where apparently it's very, very hot, like it is here, but they have much more intense. It's not the humidity, by the way. It's the dew point. And if the dew point is high, which it has been, it's like standing in a sauna. And I was listening to some of the coverage this morning on Fox. Did you know that they've got people standing in these long lines to get into the convention hall out of security concerns? It's not just passing through the great big fence around the perimeter, but then you've got these long lines to get in. You stand in that sweating. These are delegates. They stand there in that humidor, and then they get through the door. And if they'd like a drink of water, $4.50 for a bottle, or they can get a Shasta Cola. That sounds like Democrats. Probably serving them all, flipping burgers for them too, and a couple of hot dogs, and calling that a banquet. Uh, and the keg's over there. Don't worry. At the end of the day, we'll go get ourselves soused on that. 808, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. So I was thinking yesterday as I was watching coverage of this convention about how you've got people in the powerful people in the Democrat organization, from Hillary Clinton down through a lot of her sycophants in the party, all trying to deflect the story away from their email problems, their latest email problems, by saying, Russia, Russia, Russia. And Russia shouldn't be interfering in our election, and they want Donald Trump. Well, first of all, do you think that Putin fears Barack Obama? And if Hillary Clinton continues Barack Obama's policies, would he rather have Hillary Clinton than, let's say, Donald Trump? I think the case is closed on that, but they're repeating it because they hope that people will stop paying attention to the subject of the emails, the content, which some of it is just awful. Some of it may be criminal. It's certainly unethical, and much of it is racist. And these are from Democrats who claim that's what the other guys are all about. So they're trying to paper that over as much as they can, and they're repeating this Russia thing. Keep in mind, a couple of weeks ago, the story broke that Mr. Obama interfered with the election in Israel, although he failed to unseat the popular prime minister there, Benjamin Netanyahu. Mr. Obama doesn't like him. Mr. Obama wanted his own guy. He thought he could find someone to sell Israel down the road and turn it into an Arab vassal state, and maybe, recreate the Holocaust all in one fell swoop. He also interfered in the Canadian elections. When Stephen Harper, who was an extremely popular conservative prime minister and was in office, I believe the third longest tenure of any Canadian prime minister, was running for re-election here, about a year and a half ago, Mr. Harper had promised, and he bet the farm really, on getting the Keystone XL pipeline done, which is hugely important to his country's economy. So even though the EPA and the federal government in this country, several other agencies, all signed off on it, Mr. Obama blocked construction, and therefore that allowed the fellow traveler, the younger Trudeau, to win the prime minister's job and push Mr. Harper out of office. So Democrats are familiar with rigging elections in other countries. They've been doing it for a long time, obviously. So I mean, go back to John F. Kennedy in South Vietnam with the Diem regime, and they helped stage a coup. And then the leader actually got killed, which they didn't intend, but that was part of the unintended consequences that happen with these sort of things. So you've got this going on, and yet they're pointing fingers saying, Russia, Russia, Russia. Now, it all comes down to their salesmen in mainstream media. Will they pick this up and run with it? And I bring this up because it was striking me yesterday that, yes, I think we're starting to see movement in that way. Mainstream media in this country essentially does the job for the Democrat Party that Joseph Goebbels did for the Nazi regime. This is Pat Buchanan writing in his column. He obviously published this late yesterday. I saw it this morning when I came into work. He says, for 4 decades, some of us had wondered what Jim McCord, security man at the Committee to Re-elect the President, and his 4 Cubans were looking for in the DNC's office at the Watergate. Now it makes sense. They were looking for details and information like we're seeing now. Among the lovely schemes at the DNC, leaders worked up the gut to Sanders, or they said that they were going to tell people he was an atheist in order to deter Christian voters in some rural parts of West Virginia and the Deep South. And he said that Sanders, they were going to say Sanders doesn't even believe in a God, hoping that that would help derail his campaign. By Sunday, he writes, Clinton's crowd had unleashed the mechanical rabbit. Here we go. Great minds think alike. And the press hounds were dutifully chasing it. The new party line, the Russians did it. Purpose, change the subject, he writes. Redirect the media away from the DNC conspiracy to sabotage Sanders. And he says, will the press cooperate? Well, this morning I got out of bed, turned on my television, started watching Fox and Friends, and thought, gee, I wonder what the fellow travelers are doing over at MSDNC's Morning Joe. I changed the channel. Lo and behold, Russia, 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 Russia. Ah, Russia. Russia, 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 Russia. Yeah. Russia, Russia. They don't even get paid by the campaign for doing this, yet they go ahead and do it anyway. I mean, I'm sorry, but to me it seems. Meanwhile, John Kerry also pressed into service. He works for the U.S. State Department, but considering it's run by Democrats at the moment, he obviously is also towing the party line. He had a chance to meet with his Soviet counterpart while traveling through Southeast Asia yesterday. And Mr. Kerry says he was tough and firm, just like he is with the servants. Remember the time the servants actually burned the beans almondine, and Teresa and I couldn't eat dinner, so we had to flog them, and they didn't like it, but they never did it again. Here he is talking about how tough and rough he was with his Russian counterpart.
I raised the question, and we will continue to work to see precisely what those facts are, and the FBI has responsibility for this investigation, and we'll let them speak. With respect to Foreign Minister Lavrov, I did raise the issue of the DNC.
Well, we know that the FBI will go out and do a bang-up job and then recommend, oh, right. No, it's not politicized whatsoever. Wouldn't happen. We've never seen it happen before now, have we? It's 8:14. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Our telephone number, if you'd like to reach our program today, is 736-0300. That's 736-0300. 63 right now. On our way, some places will likely hit 100 today. I also had a chance to take a quick look at the weather before I actually left the house this morning. And then when I got to work, I looked at it a second time. And our high temperatures for the remainder of the week are pretty much all upper 90s. And they're likely being somewhat conservative about that. If you actually watch the Weather Channel report, I take a look at that sometimes in the morning too. They're saying that we will have triple digits at least at the beginning of this weekend, if not throughout the latter part of this week. So just something to keep in mind as we move forward through this. But seriously, not as stinking hot as it is, let's say, at the Democrat National Convention right now. Speaking of this email dump, this came out from the Daily Caller, and it just tells you, once again, we're dealing with not just a mainstream media, but new media that is working hand in glove with the fellow travelers. Daily Caller says WikiLeaks took to Twitter Saturday night informing followers that Facebook was censoring content and offered people an alternative way to post links to Facebook from WikiLeaks. In other words, after the email dump, if people were posting stories about it, Facebook was censoring those stories. They were not appearing in news feeds. Then the writer goes on to say, as I lose my voice here, Facebook's chief security officer, a fellow by the name of Alex Stamos, acknowledged the censorship and tweeted at WikiLeaks Sunday saying the social media giant fixed the problem. Well, that would mean they basically got embarrassed and went in and said, all right, we'll allow people to actually publish that and put it back into the news feeds. While Facebook has acknowledged it blocked the WikiLeaks DNC email dump, it has not explained why. Of course not. Here you have to admit, there's a great piece today from the woman who works in a role called the public editor. That's supposedly like the ombudsman at the New York Times. She's the latest hire. They've had to have a public editor there now ever since a fellow named Jason Blair wrote stories that he made up out of whole cloth and was getting them published in the New York Times. And after that embarrassment, the Times went out, hired somebody who they say is an advocate for the public. Now, years ago, that was Daniel Okrent, I believe, who you may remember from baseball TV series. And I remember reading once, I think it was him, he or one of his counterparts in that role, was actually saying that he went to the New York Times chief editor at the time and said, "Is the Times a liberal newspaper?" And the chief editor said, "No, no, we prefer urban." Well, that's a euphemism. Whatever you call it, it's still a liberal newspaper. And the woman who's actually now taking over the role says the Times has a serious problem because even the perception among many liberals is that they are so dadgum liberal anymore that you can't trust anything that they're actually writing. And there's a belief now, even among many liberals, that the New York Times, which is mainly staffed by liberals, I mean, almost wholly staffed by liberals, is changing the way the news is reported in order to try and convince you to go along with what the reporters and editors there believe, instead of just giving you some basic facts where you can make up your own mind. And she went around the newsroom and she said that all of these people she was asking the question were all rolling their eyes, which is very typical. They like to say, "No, we're not. No, we're not. No, we're not." That's usually their own. Everybody does it. We get criticism from everywhere. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Well, she said that they are mainly urban progressives. That's how she describes them. She also says you don't put editorials about gun control on the front page. And she says a lot of people, when they go to the website and they see opinion mixed in with news, can't make up their minds about what's what. And I know years ago when I actually had seen that initial story from the public editor, I went to speak at a college campus. I was invited as the lone conservative to speak to a journalism class. And I kept hearing from all of the liberals, "No, we're not. No, we're not." So I pulled out a stack of those copies of that guy's column and some other points too as well that I was making, passed them around the class, and you saw jaws dropping left and right. It's always nice to come along with evidence. You're next. We got about a minute before the break. You'll have to keep it brief.
Yes, quickly. Last night, MSDNC, they were sitting around talking to Al Franken, and
Wow.
he's such a pillar of priorities, whatever. Forgive me, that's not what I meant. But remember how he was elected and they found a bunch of votes in the trunk of a car, and he was elected by the way. I mean, it was that close. And you say to yourself, as people from MSDNC were sitting there listening to him, you could have said, "Well, are you guys on the payroll for the Democratic National Committee?" Because they were all talking just like they were working for him.
Yeah.
And it was just painfully true, and it scares the hell out of me. Thanks, Bill.
Hey, thank you. There is one silver lining in that. It was on MSDNC, which means only 17 people nationwide saw it. 20 minutes after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Steve Millington will be along in about 10 minutes. Also, I'm told through some mutual friends, mutual, I'll get that out. I'm stumbling over my words today. Now, that may mean I've got a busy mind or I'm just not getting enough sleep. Can't be the latter. All right. I'm single right now. I get plenty of sleep. But I'm telling you right now, we've got a guest coming up in the 9 o'clock hour. I'm told it's retired Congressman Barney Frank, who's going to be giving us his take on what's going on at the Democrat National Convention. That in the next hour on KLIX.